no such evidence. Without his father's permission, as he did not need it, he was 19 now and old enough, Refo had made his way down into the heart of the city, into the student district, and though it had been difficult to find through a series of persons and questions, Refo found himself standing before the very site at which she had died, his mother, and it was painfully obvious where it had been, as the street was yet stained red. They could not clean it off the brick, someone had told him. They had tried for days. Instead, that same someone had said they would have to wait for the rain in time to take hold once more. Refo did not care, only that he knew where she had died, and actually he was somewhat glad for this dismal sight, as it meant that he knew the exact location. From there he could begin. The student district was mostly along one street, cobbled and graded, worn out from years of use. Refo had brought with him a friend of a sort of detective, In truth, it was an old classmate of his, Jorgen, who happened to have a keen eye for detail, as it were, something that Refo knew could come in handy. After all, Jorgen had solved a few smaller mysteries back in school. Surely he could aid in some way in this endeavor as well. Refo looked over to him. He had a big grin on his face. Perhaps he had found something already, though Refo did not smile back at him. Refo never smiled. That was not his temperament nor his fashion. Of course, what Jorgen had noticed hadn't been anything noteworthy. A piece of paper with something written on it, a play that was playing along the same street on which they stood on the next Saturday. They wouldn't very much enjoy it, the two of them. Well, Jorgen might, but Refo? No. He wouldn't enjoy it at all. In fact, he loathed plays, but he loathed most things, after all. In any case, it was important that they continue on searching, but the entire day as they searched, they came across nothing of note, nothing at least that the two of them could notice, that might pertain in any sense or way to the murder, or rather the death of Refo's mother, which it had been. He was yet uncertain, but he was certain to believe that perhaps he had too quickly assumed that perhaps his gut feeling had been wrong, and that perhaps he had wanted there to be someone, after all, to blame for this tragedy, as it were. There wasn't, however, he thought, or perhaps there was, he couldn't be sure. With other thoughts on his mind, he and Jorgen, who hadn't much to say, he never really did, trekked back to the estate. When they arrived, Refo entered with Jorgen, but soon discovered his father standing at the front door, awaiting him. As he noticed, he turned to Jorgen and told him to come back over another time, that his father would not like it if he stayed. In fact, he would not like it one bit. As Refo approached, he held his head high as he could, and attempted to look his father in the eye. Refoperal gave Refo a firm, steadied look. He was sizing him up, he was. And of course, what he found was unsatisfactory. He made this audibly clear without actually speaking, but rather with the way that he postured and cocked his head to the side ever so slightly. When he finally did speak, it was bad yet interesting news. He spoke of the family company, of Shorewood's company, and of course of Refo's obligations to it. This was a surprise to Refo, as he had always assumed that his father would have sent him off somewhere to study, to fight, to whatever, not this. A part of Refo, a strange, unfamiliar place within his mind, did find it interesting, to say the least, the company. And so his father spoke, something he had never done with Refo, in length of what he was to do now. Refo, he began. Refo was keen to listen for once. You are my son, his father continued. You will eventually take my place as the owner of this company, the Shorewood's company. Refo nodded. And if I refuse? You may not, his father said decidedly. Refo broke his gaze and looked downwards at his father's chest, broad and puffed out. A stout man he was, and Refo yet feared him. Continuing a time more, his father spoke. You will take charge for the time being. He always spoke as if sighing, as if he were disappointed, at least to Refo, and if not in this manner, in another manner, as if he was enraged, and he continued, of the woods and other territories. The woods, which would not be the woods surely soon if they continued to cut, was the place just outside of the city, where the Sherwood's company collected all of its timber. Obviously, it was just a wooded area, a forest with a simple name. But there were others like it, obviously, and Sherwood's company owned them. All of them. Well, all of them except for about 5%, which belonged to the Darkwoods Company, which his father found remarkable enough to speak of incessantly. He hated them, or at least he pretended to. In truth, he saw in them and their family the husband and wife and their young children who ran it, though of course the children yet did so. Something in them that he saw in himself at one point in his life, something which he thought that he didn't see in Refo. A ferocity, perhaps, where in Refo there had only been thought, contemplation, and a coldness which his father seemed to loathe. Refo did not know why, as his mother had been of a similar disposition. Perhaps he thought that was why then, and thoughts of what his father might have done to his mother, that he might have done it, entered his mind once more, but of course he kept quiet and listened to what Refoperal Rocumulus had to say. After all, perhaps he could benefit, and surely he would. But Refoperal Rocumulus spoke no more of Refo's obligations as they were, and rather changed the conversation to more pressing matters. Well, pressing enough as far as Refo was concerned. "Come inside," his father said. "We have dinner tonight, with guests." Refo gulped. He'd always loathed these sorts of gatherings. Surely there would be many familiar faces there, whom he was uncertain, but there was one thing that he knew for certain. It would not be a pleasant experience, and his father would surely bring up his obligations to the company, publicly, or rather privately, in that room with the others, in the dining hall. So as his father walked ahead of him, Refo followed behind somewhat sluggishly, then picking up speed until finally he entered the banquet hall rather than the entrance to it. The doors were very large and oaken with the usual owl design alongside other animals, a gazelle, a lion, what have you. His father looked at his son before entering and, for once in his entire life, smiled at him warmly, as if he understood that Refo did not want to go, which surely he always had, but cared never before had he tried. Refo could not tell if it was a fake smile or not. It didn't matter. It made Refo feel much more at ease, and his father pushed one of the doors to open to the banquet hall. Refo smiled, another rare smile, and Refo felt, for the first time in his life, very comfortable around his father, strangely. Perhaps his father had not done anything, he thought. Perhaps it had been an accident, the murder of his mother. He was uncertain, but perhaps this was so.